Sox. He is on the call with John Smoltz, Tom Verducci, and Ken Rosenthal, kind enough to join us now from the Big Apple. Joe, thank you so much for being with us. Let's start with the Dodgers first, who came out in Game 1 and kind of punched the Mets right in their throat. Of course, the Mets would answer, but Game 1 looked like a very complete team. Game 2, not so much. What is your X factor in this series for both teams?
Yeah, I mean, it was the latest snapshot of how fast things can change, right? They completely changed roles, and the Dodgers, it looked pretty one-sided in that first game, but it looked just as one-sided yesterday with the Mets getting off to that fast start. I think the start to the game is huge. The Mets have been really reliant on comebacks so far this postseason, and Smoltz was saying it during Game 1. That's just it's fun, but it's not the way to live sustainably. So they get off to the fast start yesterday and totally changed the deal. You know, you're able to not have to cover as many innings with your bullpen because the starter goes deep like Manaea did, relatively speaking. And then when you get a lead and you have Diaz, even though that's been shaky, if you get good Diaz, I think that winds up being the biggest difference in this series. What version of Edwin Diaz do you get if you're the Mets?
That's a great question and a good point. Let me ask you this, because there was some question, Joe, about why Dave Roberts elected to go with a bullpen game in Game 2 instead of throwing Walker Buehler in Game 2. You've had a lot of conversations with them. You've seen this team on the daily basis. What was the thought process behind a bullpen game in Game 2?
I think instead of Game 3, in that if you do Game 3 as a bullpen game, you're playing 3 games in a row right then, 3 games in 3 days, and it's harder to recover if you have to really unload the pen and use all your top arms. Whereas if you do it in Game 2, as they did, you have the off day to follow that, and then you get a legitimate starter going to begin your 3 games in 3-day stretch.
Shohei Ohtani needs to get things going offensively. It sounds very strange to say that, considering Shohei Ohtani is creating historic categories all his own. What have you noticed from his approach?
You know what's crazy, Alanna, is how different it is, not necessarily approach, but the outcomes for the base is empty. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but it's something like 6 out of 9 with runners on base. 0 for 19 or 20 with the bases empty. So, of course, he's going to get pitched more difficultly when the bases are empty. You can be more careful. You're not going to give him as much to hit, but that is drastic. And I'm interested here the next 24 hours as we get ready for Game 3. I want to dive in and see how different it is that he's being pitched, you know, how many strikes he's getting when there are guys on base versus not, if he's being over eager in those situations at all, and just kind of see what's behind this. Because, you know, look, during the regular season, it's a week and a half where it's like, oh, Shohei is not quite as dominant as he has been, but everything is so magnified. You get to this time of year, like you said, they do have to get him going.
Well, I tell you what, he's certainly, I shouldn't say certainly, likely going to be the National League MVP. But if it wasn't for the year that Shohei is having, Joe, it would be Francisco Lindor getting that award. What has been so impressive to you about the way that he's kind of gone about his business? I mean, the Mets go as Lindor goes.
Yeah, if you look at the stat line, it's obvious that he's been great. But then when you start diving into the season story for the Mets, every time, just like yesterday, that they needed somebody to step up, it seems like it was him. They get beat 9-0 in Game 1. They're in desperate need of a mood change, a new tone set. And in an 8-pitch at-bat, he finishes it with a solo home run to set an entirely new tone for the second game. And the Mets were off and rolling from there. Just the latest example of him not just giving him production, but giving him timely production, meaningful hits, as he's done throughout this run.
This has been the hottest Met team for a long time. I did question why Kodai Senga in Game 1. It's a moot point at this point. They're moving to Game 3 in Queens. But what was your thought process about starting Senga, who's been hurt and hasn't pitched a ton this year, starting him in Game 1? What was Mendoza's thought process behind that?
I think a high upside play. They still think that if he's right, that that's the best stuff that they have. Now, I don't know how sure anybody could be that you're going to be right when you've only pitched 7 innings all year. So it was definitely a bit of a gamble, especially when you have 3 starters that you know you can rely on, that they now have lined up at this point with Manaea to Severino and Quintana. I don't know that you can pitch Senga again with how that looked. I don't know that you need to. We'll see as the series goes on. You know, Alanna, 7-game series, the length can sometimes test you and make you do things you'd rather not. Hindsight's 20/20, but they had a guy who they felt like the stuff is as good as anybody they have. And and gave it a shot, and it did backfire. But thank God for the Mets. They have Manaea and these legitimate starters to follow it and make up for it.
Yeah, Manaea's looked great so far as a Met. Let me ask you this. Game 3, Walker Buehler, Luis Severino. As you mentioned, Severino has pitched good at home. Walker Buehler has struggled a bit on the road. For both of those pitchers, Joe, how do you know that they're on? What do you need to see right away?
It's going to be like it's 2018 all over again. Those two guys pitching in a big game, right? I think for Walker Buehler, it's the fastball command. He's got a million different pitches, but can he command his fastball? And the numbers in his last start against San Diego, they weren't good. He gave up 6 runs. If you can ever say that the start was better than it looked when he gave up 6 runs, I think this would be the case. All 6 runs came in 1 inning. There were some soft hits in that inning, a couple errors in that inning that kind of schemed against him. Otherwise, 4 scoreless innings against a good Padres lineup. So the Dodgers, I think, taking some kind of comfort from that. And Luis Severino, just like everybody in this Mets rotation, very quietly has fueled this great run down the stretch. The Mets rotation, we talk about Lindor, and we talk about Vientos and all the magic this offense is providing. The rotation's been the best in the National League for a month and a half, 2 months, with guys that you wouldn't picture leading the way like that. So, the Mets feel like their biggest strength in this series, their biggest advantage in this series is the pitching head-to-head as they get to this legitimate run of throwback starters games 2 through 4.
This one seems like it's going to be a knockout, drag-out fight. I would not be surprised, Joe Davis, if it goes to 7 games. Joe Davis, the voice of Major League Baseball on Fox, thanks for taking the time, my friend. We'll see you soon.
Of course, Alanna. Thank you.